Hi, I'm Michelle Shingler, the editor-in-chief of Foreword Reviews, and you're tuning in to Petit Foreword, our bite-sized interviews with indie authors. Today we're speaking with Alisa Alering, whose novel Smothermoss released on July 16th. It's a glorious Southern Gothic novel that unravels the intergenerational tales of women living on the edge and celebrates their innate, powerful magic. Alisa, thank you for joining.
Hi, Michelle. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So your book intertwines Southern Gothic themes and Appalachian storytelling methods. What about that combination speaks to you?
So I think that I've always been drawn as a reader to Gothic stories, which includes Southern Gothic, but also sort of the historical, traditional European Gothic. I like crumbling houses, really atmospheric nature, and sort of just that spooky sense of foreboding. Um, Then the Appalachian storytelling part just comes from my own heritage. I grew up in now not southern Appalachia, but just above the Mason-Dixon line, Pennsylvania, Appalachia. But there's a lot of the Scotch-Irish heritage people, the sort of independence and small farms and the isolation of being cut off, where the importance of, I guess, what people say within their families and the stories they tell about how to navigate the world that they're living in are really important to your.
So, which storytellers do you derive inspiration from, and where does your book fit among those books?
So I've been thinking about this question a lot because it's something a lot of people want to know. And in some ways, I feel like it's hard to pinpoint any one thing. I have been a voracious reader for my whole life, and I only had at first my small public library, so I couldn't ever go deep in one thing. I just read what was in front of me to take in more. I've been really influenced, I think, by atmospheric crime novels, so like detective fiction set, in the wild moors in England, or and also even the romantic Gothic novels, which I mentioned. I read a lot of historical romances when I was a kid. And though there's not much in the way of romance in the story, I do think that that sort of mm, a woman on her own tries to make her way in the world against adverse circumstances. I think that aspect comes through even from the romance part of Gothics. And I also just like weird and uncanny fiction. So that could be, I've been a huge fan of Haruki Murakami. So we're going somewhere culturally really different, and his novels are mostly contemporary, but still strange things happen. And as a reader, I just delight in that. So I wanted to do that in my own story.
So, feminine magic is also a very powerful force in your novel. Where does Angie and Sheila's family magic come from?
So I would almost say that it's not really family magic, but it's nature magic. Um, that if there is a family connection to their magic, it's because their family has lived on this mountain for such a long time, and that they've had the opportunity to form that connection of close listening to the environment around them. And so their magic, such as it is, comes from their ability to connect with the natural world.
So there are elements of realism that are really strong throughout your novel. The girls deal with economic hardships, they deal with school bullying, but there's also this strong element of magical realism and supernatural influences. How should your readers navigate the line between what's quote unquote real in the book and what is perhaps imagined?
I think that's one of the things that I, as a reader, like about ambiguous magic or ambiguous supernatural things is that you, as the reader, can dial that into your own preference. Like you have the choice. Like if you want to think that this is really magical magic and there is unquestionable supernatural things and powers behind what's happening, that interpretation is fully available to you. But if you're somebody who's uncomfortable with that and you're like, well, I think, these are really some pretty imaginative girls. I mean, we know with Angie, with her fantasies of surviving the nuclear apocalypse and fighting the Russians, that imagination is really real to her, then if that's your comfort zone, then that's available to you too.
So, what about the sisters makes them uniquely equipped to defeat the killer on the Appalachian Trail?
Okay, so are they uniquely equipped? I think that I mean, for Angie's part, her answer is because, she's heroic and that of course, just what she's been meant to do for her whole life is capture the bad guy and make him pay. Um, I think that part of it's their magic, their connection to the mountain. They could not do this on their own. I also think that they're uniquely equipped because they're uniquely affected. It's the original murder of the hikers is a wound to the mountain and to the community. I mean, obviously, as well as to the victims themselves. And so the sisters are so affected by that if not them, who, I think is what it amounts to.
So, do you imagine that Sheila would in fact choose a future away from her family's home, or are her ties to the mountain too strong?
I think that's a really difficult question. I also think that no matter what choice she ultimately makes, and I can see her going either way, I think that there's loss in either choice, that she can't, like, it isn't not an impossible situation, but a hard situation. If she were to leave the mountain, there are a lot of things that sustain her about living where she does that she would either give up or just lose access to. And a lot of that has to do with her connection to the natural world and the strength that she derives from that. But if she stays, she keeps that connection, but then there's not a lot of room for growth of other kinds. And that's the bind that she finds herself in from the beginning of the book, really. And it's not resolved at the end. I think that she maybe has more choices, or she at least has the ability to consider more clearly what choice she wants to make. But there is going to be pain either way.
And what about Angie? Do you think she's going to find what she's looking for?
Hmm. In some ways, I think that she has a better chance. That part of it is that her personality means that she doesn't feel the fact that she's a poor fit for somewhere as strongly as Sheila does. And so even though if she heads out into the world um, and pursues some of her militaristic fantasies, that though she's not the character that most people imagine filling that role exists. And so if people are like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, that might not upset her too much. And so she may find her way in the wider world a little easier.
So, what else are you working on right now?
Yeah, I'm working on an early draft of a next book that I hope will be equally creepy. It is also going to be set in Pennsylvania. It's going to be set, the Smothermoss was in the 1980s. This is going to be much more closer to contemporary time. And in some ways, it's sort of an answer, maybe, to the question about what happens when they go out in the world, because this is going to be about an older woman who left home when she was very young. And in fact, in my head, it was 17, which is the age Sheila is in the book. And now, after like 20 some years, she's returning to her family home, which has developed some very unusual properties.
Very cool. We will look forward to that. And to our audience, you have to go pick up this novel. It's beautiful, it's fantastic. It's set in Appalachia. There's a murder, there's a mystery, there's LGBTQ, love, the possibility of love. It's just a fabulous novel. And Alisa, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Michelle. It was great answering these questions.